Welcome to Jurassic Park.
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind.
Welcome to the party, pal.
I'll be back.
I'll have what she's having.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
Here's looking at you, kid.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hello, I'm your host Jim McClean. Welcome back to another episode of More Than Pixels on a Screen, a spoilerific movie review podcast brought to you by BanterFlix, cinematic discussion with a Northern Irish accent. Now, for this episode, we are paying tribute to, I'm going to say, one of the all-time greats, David Lynch, who sadly passed away at the age of 78. A lot of tributes are out there. I've seen Steven Spielberg, Nick Cage, a lot of filmmakers, both from Hollywood and further afield, talking about the influence that David Lynch had on them as filmmakers, actors, or just generally working within the industry. And I thought here at BanterFlix, we would pay our own little tribute. And for this, I am joined by my co-host, Adam Neeson.
Hello.
And the lovely Joe McElroy.
How you doing?
It's great to have you both on. As we say, we're normally banterful and silly boys, but I thought it would be a little bit serious this week. Or, well, I'm sure there'll be silliness. Will creep in. It's us, after all. But we couldn't not mark the passing of David Lynch. And I'll just say at this point, like, it's weird that in some of the podcasts that we had previously recorded in January prior to his passing, we referenced David Lynch, and I think in pretty much every episode we do, there's a David Lynch reference in there, from whether it's the Christmas specials, whether it's just talking about his love for that not everything needs to be explained, the dreamlike nature of his features. I know last month, I think you referenced, Joe, when you were on, you were stepping in for Adam while he was on holiday. You talked about Straight Story, we were talking about road movies. In the Nosferatu episode, we were talking just generally about David Lynch and this idea, as I've mentioned, the kind of his... I know some viewers find it frustrating. Other people like me love it, the sense that he will not give you all the answers. He sits back and says, this is art. Cinema is, there's a dreamlike quality to it. You decide what this means. I'm not going to force it upon you. And we look at that in the way cinema has went off late. You were talking about this on a previous podcast, Joe, talking about how it's so exposition heavy now. This is what is happening. We look in a world where we have to have prequels to explain stuff. David Lynch, without a doubt. I'm someone who's, 43 later this year. I got introduced to Lynch when I was probably too young, watching Twin Peaks. I'm sure we'll talk about that with my late father. I have very fond memories of watching that with him. And I've started rewatching it with my lovely wife, and it's quite funny watching her kind of going, I'm sorry, what? What's happened? Who's Bob? What's the log lady? Why the fuck's he talking backwards? And it's just like sitting back going, lovely. And then as a student coming to Queen's, reintroduced to Lynch with Mulholland Drive. Look, that's me being a bit gushy. Normally we're a bit silly. As I say, we're not for now anyway. Adam, as the filmmaker in the room between the three of us, talk generally, before we look at some specific films, David Lynch, I guess actually your thoughts. Were you still on holiday when he passed, or had you returned home?
Literally woke up from I'd landed that day and woke up from my jet lag nap to have about 10 messages from 10 different people, both being like, David Lynch is dead, can you believe it? And other people being like, are you okay? Because people know that David Lynch is very much a part of me, to the point that I have a picture of David Lynch directing on set of Mulholland Drive beside my bed. Like, I look up to him that much, and it's funny to say that, like, he wouldn't be a big influence on me filmmaking wise. He has more of an influence on me as a person and how he comes up with ideas or how he sees ideas. And he's the sort of influence you want, where he's someone that isn't going to be like, if you read this book and read that book, then this is how you tell a story.
But just to cut across, would you not say then that is still him influencing you as a filmmaker?
Oh, 100%. Like,
maybe not your style, and maybe well, Lynch had a great sense of humour. We see that in so many of his films, and I guess so prevalent within Twin Peaks, particularly the early series. I guess even Twin Peaks: The Return. But would you not, just on that note, just from listening to you saying you might not think he's an influence you as a filmmaker, but he is an influence in you as a filmmaker.
Yes, but not as... See, whenever people say they're influenced by Lynch, it's always people that don't understand it. Because it's people that be like, well, if you get to make something weird, then it must be Lynchian. Like that cursed term of Lynchian, which I'm sure David enjoyed himself. The classic Simpsons, Homer watching Twin Peaks. Brilliant.
I have no idea what's happening.
But he was such a... Like, if you ever watch his masterclasses or him talking about stories, he talks about ideas coming to him like you're fishing. One will come along eventually, and that's the one that'll stick in your head, and that's the one that's worth making. And that is a lot of the time how I make something. I always joke it would be like I'm on the toilet or in the bathroom, and
I've had many a voice note.
Usually, if an idea comes to me fully formed, or what I think is fully formed at the time, you get the feeling of fuck, that's good. Like, that's a good idea, rather than sitting
You're not
for...
raging. Well, I suppose you've got voice notes and you can put it in your phone, but if you're in the bath, you're not like, where's my pen and paper?
Where's my rubber duckies?
Yeah.
No, because usually an idea that good, you don't forget. It's the Jerry Seinfeld waking up in the middle of the night and writing something on a piece of paper. Do you remember what a joke is? But David Lynch is a guy, whenever I was going through fucking heavy depression episodes in life, listening to him talk about transcendental meditation, I wouldn't say, that I'm fully behind transcendental meditation. Everybody's open to their own religion or whatever, but listening to a man be so connected to the earth, and so, he knew who he was, and that's one of the best things about him. Listening to that really helped me in that time. And then Twin Peaks is weirdly, and people that love Twin Peaks and Lynch, weirdly, a comfort watch, even though it's some of the scariest shit you'll ever see on TV. But like you say, Jim, sense of humour, great. If you don't laugh at Billy Ray Cyrus in Mulholland Drive, then you probably don't get Lynch.
No, you're not going to get Lynch if you're not laughing at that. Look, I just remember, I've talked about this in this podcast before, and I've just mentioned it briefly at the intro there, watching Mulholland Drive for the first time. Probably in the best possible way / worst possible way. 3 friends, we didn't go back to Oma at the weekends. We were renting in Belfast. I think it was our second year at Queen's. We used to go to Extravision and rent 3 random movies. We didn't go to the new releases section. We went just random, picking up Mulholland Drive. Oh, there's Naomi Watts in that. I'll watch this. And that being like the middle point of 3 films. I can't remember specifically what 3, but maybe about like 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting down to watch Mulholland Drive and just being like, literally coming back to that because you've mentioned it, the Homer Simpson, the first time watching it, kind of going, brilliant. I have no idea what's going on, but at the same time feeling the need to go around the place shouting, Silencio! Silencio! And then rewatching it over the years and just fallen in love for it. And all the things I love about Lynch is kind of the use, not just the strange nature of things and this sense that he will, it's like the jigsaw where he'll not necessarily give you an image to go by what you're looking for. You can make the pieces up. You can make the leap. You have to take a leap of it. It's like Nolan. He gives an audience a certain amount of degree of respect. They say, you make up your own mind. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to all the dots don't have to connect. If you don't get it, that's fine. Maybe go back and rewatch it. Isn't there notes inside? Was it one of the DVD release of kind of, look, I'll help you. This is my interpretation of what this means, but it might mean other things to other filmmakers or other people. And, I'd already watched Twin Peaks, as I said, with my father. And then being reintroduced, Mulholland Drive, then suddenly finding this, the likes of Lost Highway, Straight Story. That's been ruined for me by Mark Kermode when he went to see it in a screening by someone who literally leaned in as he was sitting about to watch it to go, it's Forrest Gump on a lawnmower. And it's like, yeah, it's true, it is. And then, we haven't even got round to talking about Blue Velvet, but Joe, we haven't even given you an opportunity to talk about it. We have our little WhatsApp group. I don't know what I was doing on Thursday. I know I was at work and then I came home and I think I just looked down suddenly and realised there was a whole glut of messages through our little WhatsApp group for BanterFlix. And I don't know if it was you or was it Victoria Brown? The lovely
Victoria, yeah.
The lovely Victoria Brown, our resident Disney queen, had put on the group that David Lynch had sadly passed away. It was a few hours late for me. It hit me, as I say, like a ton of bricks. But for you, when you heard it, I don't know, it sounds like a bit OTT statement. Where were you when you heard that David Lynch passed? But it hit me like a ton of bricks in the same way as I just said pre-recording when I heard about Carrie Fisher passing away, when I heard about Alan Rickman. But the Lynch one hit me a little bit harder, and the only way I can describe it is the same way when there was people who heard that David Bowie died. And the sense is that, there's not going to be another David Lynch movie. Yes, we still have his films, but I think that he's not out there with that wonderfully weird voice, his wonderfully weird take on life. And whether you believe in everything, as Adam has mentioned, he had a very positive outlook. But I asked you a question and then proceeded to ramble a bit more. So for you, how did you take the news?
It was a big shock, to be perfectly honest, because I was literally just sitting down at my computer, just working on something or other, and then got the message. I was like, no, that's not true. And then looked up, and sure enough, it was confirmed. And it's funny because earlier in the day, one of my mum messaged in our family WhatsApp group that my granny's neighbour, who would have known growing up, had died. And I was like, oh, that's sad. But when I heard, I know it's awful to say, but when I heard Lynch died, it literally hit me like a ton of bricks. And it just hit me in the pit of my stomach, and I was just instantly upset and shocked, and I didn't know what to think. And that's the weird thing about it, because I felt worse about that than people that generally know, because you feel like you know him through his work and everything he's given in his creative output. And he is, like you were saying, a character like a person like David Bowie, or even like Prince for some people as well.
Prince, yeah.
That, there are these figures and icons that you think were going to live forever. Like, you didn't think oh, that person's dead now, or that person's dead now. Like, probably previous to that, the most affected I've been by the death of someone famous was William Friedkin. Another person whose work I absolutely adored, and then it was crap when he died, because I was in a cafe and I got the message and I was frigging tears streaming down my face. I was like, for frig's sake. But it's a normal thing to do. You should react that way. It's normal.
Sorry, I cried at Tesco's when Pee-wee Herman died.
I remember you saying that. I know. It just goes to show how powerful these things can affect you. And I'll always have them to thank, because I don't think we would have been friends if it weren't for David Lynch. Because I remember when we were first meeting, just to see, if it'd be a good fit, BanterFlix, we were talking about The Return, because it was out around then. And we were talking about our love of that. And that's what sort of brought us together. And it's moments like that there that you learn to appreciate someone like David Lynch and how their work can bring people together.
Yeah,
and really connect
it's
them.
an amazing thing that film can do. And I guess both filmmakers, actors, in that sense that it's like the Roger Ebert thing. Cinema is an empathy generator. You don't know these people. You watch them in interviews, you read about them, you listen to interviews, and you get that sense, oh yeah, and you can kind of, like with everything, we all three of us here grew up in the DVD era.
Yeah.
So I'm sure most of us have kind of maybe watched a few of Lynch's films, as say his interviews, commentaries, etc., that kind of thing, the free film school, as Leo McGuigan talks about it. And you do get this kind of connection to these people that you will never know. I know that's what Hugh Audley-Smee from Film Hub and I always talks about cinema being this thing that it's a window into the world of people you will never know, will never meet, but for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is, you get to be in their world. And I guess we're talking about Lynch as a filmmaker. Let's not forget what an amazing on-screen performer he is. Like, we see him in Twin Peaks. I know there's over the years there's been various films he's popped up in. Yes, he does kind of the same kind of shtick. I think, wasn't it The Fabelmans?
Mm-hmm.
He was in
John Ford in it.
Yeah, and there's a great bit of casting. He just, like Werner Herzog, when you see him on screen, he's traditionally, it's Werner Herzog on screen, and you just want to give him a little hug. Same with Lynch. Yeah.
Even in Lucky, remember that Harry Dean Stanton?
Yeah.
His last film. It's funny, like, it is the same voice as Gordon Cole. It's the same, he's the same in everything else. But that's the thing, like, it's weird how you get introduced to him, because you're on about, the DVD generation. Like, I don't know how someone would get into his work now, because for me, it was Twin Peaks was my door. As my mate was like, "Oh, did you ever watch this show, Twin Peaks?" I was like, "Nah." He's like, "Just go out and get the box set and give it a go." And that's the time when it's like, "Oh, it's like 10 or 15 quid. I'll give it a go. Why not?" Sad watching it, mesmerised by it. I was like, I need to watch everything this man's done. So, like, I even mentioned in the group, took a picture of all like David Lynch box sets and stuff. That's the first thing I did. Went out, got the 2 box sets, watched all the films, and it's one of those things, like, you sort of feel bad for this generation. It's like they don't really have that as much. I know they're streaming, but I don't think it's the same.
I wouldn't say they don't have it. They do have it, but it's a sense, old men in the room, really, we should say. In that sense, prior to streaming, you had to go out. Like, it seems like going to cinema. You had to go to HMV, Golden Discs, back in their day, and get out and get stuff. Extravision, you had to go and rent stuff. Not that it was more effort, but you had to go and get it. Now, with streaming, there is so much stuff out there. There's just like a glut of stuff. And I do always say to myself, it's like, it's never been easier to get your film out there, but I guess it's never been harder to get it watched and to get attention, unless you get real back-end traction, social media. Like, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about Baby Girl, how the kind of little viral ad campaigns are kind of like by influencers. It was a bit crude. It was like girls going to watch the film and then kind of drying down their seat afterwards. A lot of the times now, films like that, indie films, need campaigns like that. So I guess a filmmaker like Lynch, yeah, he'd still be out there making content, but I guess it's whether or not he would have as loud a voice. And you mentioned, Adam, his masterclasses. I don't know whether this is just post his passing, as I say, last month, or whether it was already, but I think those masterclasses, that talk that he does, I think it's free now. Did you have to pay for those before?
I paid for mine. I got the Scorsese, Spike Lee and David Lynch sort of pack or whatever, but I think it is free now. Not the bits where he talks about specific films, but where he talks about capturing ideas and stuff. But it's funny to say, Joe, that, like, how would anybody get into it now? And I think it's sort of maybe the way we got into it back in the day, in the terms of, you see one image of Lynch and your mind immediately is like, the fuck's that? Like, I need to know that. Like, you see the Eraserhead poster, you're immediately like, what could that possibly be? And then you're sucked in. If you see, I know a lot of, especially women, see any of Laura Palmer's scenes in Twin Peaks and are immediately like, I want to fucking watch that, because it's like, Cheryl Lee's performance is so raw in Twin Peaks, and thanks to David Lynch, who sort of just found her out of nowhere and brought her in and had this vision for Laura Palmer and had this love for Laura Palmer that not a lot of directors and writers have for their characters. Like, they just want to... Twin Peaks, perfect example, would have been just a normal cop show, but with the influence of Lynch and Mark Frost, obviously, that turned into a show that became the phenomenon it is. Obviously, season 2 sort of falls into what the network wanted, and Lynch comes back and fixes it, and the return is just probably maybe the best thing he ever made. But it's obviously on the backbone of everything else. But I would like to think that, unfortunately, with Lynch's passing, maybe this will inspire a newer generation to seek out his work. It's good to see that, like, Criterion have practically all of his films. And there is, like, the whole, joy for social media, or not social media, but physical media back in sort of the popular mainstream, that hopefully the people that Lynch would want to see his movies either already have or will definitely now that he's passed. He's had such a big influence in cinema. He is sort of like, when you talk cinema, it's weird that you kind of do think David Lynch, because he's been around that long and his visuals have been so inspiring in a lot of things, and there's TV shows you wouldn't think have references to Lynch, like Gilmore Girls. Like, my missus watched Gilmore Girls religiously, and I'm like, they're talking about Twin Peaks. There's characters in this that are from Twin Peaks. And she's like, I don't know what that is, but like, for the fans, it's great.
Yeah, and even just generally the influence of a show like Twin Peaks. Like, I was talking to my lovely wife, we sat down to watch it, because I really was, and I know it sounds OTT, but like yourselves, it was just from Thursday, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I came in to work, and I think that's maybe old man in the room frustrating point, because I came in and with my other job was doing the headlines at 6:30, and I said, oh, Steven Spielberg has said this and that about David Lynch, Nick Cage. Can I just add my own kind of thing? I think the filmmaker had a huge influence on me. And I'm not a filmmaker, just my passion for cinema. And I'm not saying it's just the audience that was there. In terms of the three people in the room at that time looked at me as if I had two heads going, what are you talking about? And you're like... And then I was just like, right, okay, I'm going home to watch Twin Peaks to cheer myself up. And I've been pleasantly surprised. My wife has found it weird. And the things that I kind of like have to explain or trying to say is like, we were on episode 3 of series 1 last night with the first Red Room sequence. And she kind of looked at me and goes, she knew about it. She's like, oh, is this like with the dwarf talking backwards? And she's like, yeah. She's like, so it's like all that stuff has kind of entered into popular culture. And when she was watching it, she was like, this is weird. This is just weird. And I think on that note, we've talked generally about stuff. I think we'll play a clip from Twin Peaks and then we'll just talk a bit about it.
And I'll have the grapefruit juice. Just as long as those grapefruits are freshly squeezed.
My name's Audrey Horn.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Dale Cooper.
Can I sit here?
Well, Miss Horn, unless I miss my guess, your father is Benjamin Horn, the owner of this fine establishment. So I imagine you can sit anywhere you'd like. I'd also like to add it would be my pleasure.
Do you like my ring?
Very nice.
You know, sometimes I get so flushed. It's interesting. Do your palms ever itch?
So that's a clip of Twin Peaks. Joe, come to you just because you mentioned you got your box set. You watched this. Was it mate you said got you into Twin Peaks?
Yeah, it was my mate Jason. It was, what age would I have been? Probably 16, 17. That's that stage in my life where it was like, you know, when you get like a specific actor or a specific director and you like their stuff, you have to watch everything they've done.
Yeah.
Like happened with John Carpenter and stuff like that there. Even Werner Herzog, funny enough, we brought him up. You just have to consume everything they've done because you're just so locked into what the, with their work. And with Twin Peaks, I was like, I asked him, what's it about? And he said, oh, it's just a detective show. And I was like, all right, because, it wasn't really my kind of thing. Because I was at that stage, I was too used to like, UK TV detective shows. I was like, well, I usually find them a bit stuffy and that there. But then you watch Twin Peaks and you get that theme music, and then
just the score in general.
Just in general.
In general,
you're just like, oh, frick, this is amazing. And then you get to the opening scene, Laura Palmer's body wrapped in plastic, and the reporting of it, and then just the sort of real sadness to things.
Yeah, you have the guy, the photographer. He literally just is, as he's doing it, he just is reduced to tears
because of that influence that one person had in the whole town. Because the thing about it as well is like, this looks a bit like a soap opera, but it didn't bother me because even then I knew that's what he's going for. Like, despite not really having a full grasp of like context of visualization and stuff when it comes to films, but then as the show went on and you enter in the more and more surreal elements to it, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I haven't seen anything less before. You know, the imagery of the Red Room, and then even this sort of strange way the characters behave. Like Cooper himself as a character, he's like a flip side of a noir detective. He's like, you know, they're usually cynical character.
Damn, that's good coffee. I'm sorry. But that's how he rolls.
Exactly. But he's basically like the flip side of a typical noir detective. He's not cynical, he's optimistic, and he's sort of joyful, and he sees the good in everything. It's a bit like a conduit for Lynch himself. Like he sees the positives out of everything. And then when you get to things like Bob and that, they're scared the absolute bleep.
Trying to explain to my lovely wife about Bob last night when I was watching it, and I was like, right, okay, because I don't know how far my lovely wife will stick with Twin Peaks with me. I genuinely don't. And I wonder if we even get to Twin Peaks The Return, how far she'll stick into that. Because it's not her cup of tea. I could be wrong, but she is generally intrigued by, we're 3 episodes into a rewatch. And it's one of those things, I feel sad about it. I've talked about, because I know it's on Paramount Plus at the minute, we're talking about streaming. And I was like, I see it there, I really want to rewatch it. And I put it off, so sadly, Lynch's passing is the catalyst for that. As I say, I don't know how long my wife will stick into it, but she has been pleasantly surprised. And just to lower the tone, guys, I took a little IMDb breakout there just while you were talking, Joe. I was listening, just in case Adam Neeson called me out on it. And
mark it down as 1.
Mine was age appropriate, I think, because I was watching. I think I could be wrong. I think it was BBC. This was on late night TV, like so many of those great shows that I grew up when I was younger watching, like Seinfeld, the Larry Sanders Show. It was on late, the early seasons of the X-Files. They were on BBC Two. I'm nearly certain Twin Peaks was on BBC, and watching it with my dad. And I can't remember, because I know Chris Carter talks about Twin Peaks being a huge influence, not in terms of the day-to-day of the X-Files, but just in that sense of being a bit braver in what you could do with a TV show and pushing it. I can't remember whether Twin Peaks got a re-release in the UK on the back of that, or just generally if we were watching Twin Peaks, because there would there have been an overlap with the two? 1990,
Twin
I think
Peaks,
it was
89 to 91.
Oh, yeah.
So when was
probably
X-Files
not
out?
then.
It was released, it was April to, I think it was like start of April it came out, and it was done by the end of May.
Yeah.
Season 1. So
There's only like 6 episodes in the first series.
Yeah.
And there's 24, I think, in the second season. I can't remember, but I know we watched, and I watched it with my dad, and it was kind of the stuff of like, I don't really get this. Again, coming back to the Homer Simpson, I don't get this. My dad didn't really get it. It was just something we could watch because he liked detective shows, and that's what he was in. But as I say, age appropriate. Come back to, I did have a bit of a crush on, is it Sherilyn Fenn? Yeah.
Audrey?
Yes, Audrey. And Laura Flynn Boyle.
Oh, yeah.
Woo, wow. Yeah. And I was talking to my friend Barry, who I often mention in this pod, who's my friend when I was growing up, and he lives in Linlithgow now. We were talking about Lynch after his passing, and even he, who's not a movie guy, he's watched the odd films, usually coming actually back to one of the movies you watched when you were on holiday, Adam. It's usually an Ace Ventura reference, so we'll throw in there, or City Slickers we'll usually talk about. But he has been sending me umpteen like little reels, or well, not TikToks, because he doesn't do that, because he's a Trump supporter. No, he's not a Trump supporter. Well, no, Trump loves TikTok. It's Biden that hates it. But even he was like sending me loads of kind of reels about Lynch talking, or just kind of various interviews and talking about it. And he talked about, within 2 minutes, he's like, yeah, wasn't there Audrey? Yeah. Whoa, wow. Whoa, wow, indeed. Yeah. Yeah. But it was age appropriate.
And she's like, oh, Dale Cooper, I really fancy you. And Dale's like, fuck off, your dad's here.
It's a bit weird.
But that was me. As I say, I have those memories of watching Twin Peaks late at night. I'm nearly certain it was BBC. Could have been RTE, because we did have that. But I don't think, I'm nearly certain it was BBC because there was no ad breaks. But when you watch it, you see that it's for cable TV, the amount of faded blacks and stuff. And yes, some of the special effects are off their time. They are. There's no way of getting that. But it's creepy. It's weird. The performances are absolutely fab. It's deadpan and it's humour. That's me. Adam, were you younger growing into Twin Peaks? Did you discover it, or was that something later on?
It was something later on. It was always one of those things that I knew of, the backwards talking in the Red Room.
Yeah.
You see the general thing. But I think by the time I got fully into Lynch was when I was a bit older. I watched Eraserhead when I was in like studying film and stuff, and being 16 I didn't really get it. I was like, yeah, okay. But then it's sort of the older you get, about 5 more years, I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, I like this now. And then I did what you did, Joe. Just, I'm going to watch everything he's ever made. And jumping into Twin Peaks, the first season, I think I watched the first season in one day. Like, it is very short, like the whole first season, but it's so good. And you're sat there watching the episode where the whole police department is throwing rocks at bottles.
Well, the Tibetan sort of
Yeah.
method, is it? Yeah.
And at that point, if you're not in by that point, really, you're like, what is this show?
Do you know what I noticed rewatching it? What Lynch was great at in that first series was the art of the hook. Why are you going to come back next week?
Yeah.
So I think, like, because we've rewatched the 3 episodes, so the first episode there's all about the bracelet or the necklace, and it's like you have to hide that. Oh, who has went back and dug that up? In the second one, isn't it that the psychiatrist, the doctor, it's like,
Jacoby.
yeah, what's going on there? And then in the third one, just because we've rewatched it, you have the first Red Room.
Yeah.
experience. And then I think about you have the Black Lodge, the White Lodge, and the Red Room.
Yeah, but the funny thing about that end episode, he's like, I know who killed Laura Palmer.
Yeah.
And then starts the next episode, I forgot.
Well, the Black Lodge and the Red Room are the same place.
Yes.
But that's all explained in The Return.
Really. And if you have the books as well, the Mark Frost.
It's explained. I guess we haven't. Do we want to mention Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me at this point before we move into kind of the movie?
I would say so. I think
we're in Twin Peaks land.
Yeah, I think it's Fire Walk with Me is growing into definitely one of my favorite films ever made. Where it's a raw nerve of a film. You don't go in watching it being like, I'll enjoy this. This will be good. But I recently, I think in the last year, seen it in the QFT.
Yeah.
I think you were sat behind me.
Yeah, we were in the same cinema, but we probably didn't realise we were at the time.
Joe was talking backwards behind you.
Same cocktails I had that night.
And just experience it in a cinema that was packed with everybody just sort of experiencing this downfall of Laura Palmer, and being so in love with Twin Peaks the series. Whenever you watch Fire Walk with Me, it's funny that people didn't really like it back in the day, because it sort of is everything Twin Peaks is apart from the comedy. It's what people thought it was going to be, with the the drama and the not detective storyness, but like what the evil of it was going to be. But Lynch sort of lets loose evil on screen, and it's very rare that you get somebody that makes a film that has no redeeming factors, but you don't come out of it feeling bad for Laura Palmer, because obviously, spoilers at the end, she sort of ascends. And you just feel like you feel better watching it and then going into the series, because you know how much Laura struggled and how much of it wasn't her fault and how much of it was the town's fault, and people just being complacent when somebody is really at their, not even wit's end, at their life's end.
Yeah.
And it's coming, and there's no stopping it. And the film is literally that unstoppable train of sorrow and pain that goes into the series and affects the town, and then you understand why the town becomes so strange, because the equilibrium of the whole town is just out of whack.
What did you say?
Yeah,
there's no other way of putting it.
As you say, it's a weird one in the sense that, like a few Lynch's films, I didn't like it I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it when I was younger for the exact reason you've mentioned, in the sense that it was the TV show, but it wasn't the TV show. It didn't have the kind of, I guess you have that, you have the confines of it's short form and long form storytelling where you have time to pause for breath, and you can take the entire police department out into the woods and throw rocks at bottles, and you're not worried about. I don't think Lynch, as a filmmaker, would be that worried about, have to tell it in this runtime, that runtime. He would be, I would imagine, have been a filmmaker, this story is exactly as long as it needs to be. And anyone, I guess, who's watched Inland Empire will know that that's a film that I know I've watched sometimes. Sometimes I watch it, I love it. Sometimes I kind of go, I cannot. I'm sorry. Sorry, David. David, I can't do it. But Fire Walk With Me, I watched, and I debated whether to rewatch it before going back to Twin Peaks, and then I decided no, it's not, because I was worried that if Amber and I sat and watched it, she wouldn't want to watch the TV show because of, is that what this is? And it's like, no. And I guess also it takes away from ambiguity of certain things. But anything you want to add on to what Adam said, Joe?
No, it's sort of along the same wavelength as yourself. The first time I saw it, I was just after, the initial box set, because I was like, wait, there's a Twin Peaks movie? I was like, oh, class. I put it on. I was like, it's a bit strange. There is a bit of humour in the opening half of it, but there is that sort of darkness to it too. Like, something's a bit off here. And then obviously once you get into Laura Palmer's story, that's when, like you said, Adam, it is just like a freight train towards, this inevitable downfall of her, because it ends with her wrapped in plastic, but as time's gone on, you learn to appreciate it more, especially with, actually the return is what helped me appreciate it more, and we'll go into that like later. But at the same time, I when watching it again in the same screen as Adam, with him kicking the seat and just speaking backwards in the air,
just laughing out loud at things that aren't funny.
I just pure like Robert De Niro in Cape Fear, cigar and chomping and all. It was in that screen.
Robert De Niro and Dirty Grandpa.
Yeah, I was kind of like Danny DeVito in It's Always Sunny during that screen. It's like, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. When I did sort of get it beforehand, but that's the moment it really locked in.
Maybe
me.
That's the thing for me. I need to watch it in the cinema. And I know, I know we talked about this before, and some people go with it, some people don't. Watching something on the big screen is different from watching at home, because I know it sounds a bit kind of Lynchian almost. You give yourself over to the screen. You put away things that will distract you, and you'll sit down and watch it. Whether you like it, you like it. Whether you don't, you don't. It's a different experience. Because I guess you can always walk out. But if you're watching stuff at home, you're like, as I say, Inland Empire, I know I'm jumping ahead, I could be in the mood to watch it. I've never seen Inland Empire in the cinema. I don't know if either of you have one.
I did, yeah.
I seen it last year and had this reaction, because Inland Empire, I was like, I can't stand it. See, when I came out of the cinema, I was like, that might be... Did we see it together? No, we didn't see it together.
Well, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But at the same time, when I watched it, it was my first time watching it, but I was a bit cold still on it. So, but I really want to watch it again, if that makes sense. So, like, if I know the KFT's doing these screens, but they did say later in the year they're going to do more. So if they do it again, I probably will go to see it again just to get more out of it.
It's one of my favourites now for seeing it on the big screen.
Okay.
So it is.
That always helps, yeah.
Okay, well, I know we're jumping about. We'll come back to Inland Empire, I guess, in a moment. Joe, you mentioned Twin Peaks, The Return, just to kind of bring us kind of full circle with all things Twin Peaks before we move on to just some other films within Lynch's back catalogue. And I guess we'll not be able to talk about all of them in detail, but Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yeah, I was, as soon as it was announced, I was like, oh, no way, they're bringing back Twin Peaks. And then initially you think of all these ideas of like, where's it going to go, what's going to happen, and all this stuff. And you're like, we're going to finally find out what happened to Dale. Dale's going to be back in a certain way and all that there. But then you don't stop to think for a second, hang on, this is Lynch. He's not going to give you a straightforward path through this here. It's going to take twists and turns, but you're going to enjoy the journey that he's going to take you on. And that's what I sort of learned to appreciate over time more with The Return, because it wasn't until episode 8 that everything sort of clicked with The Return for me, because I was like, a bit unsure about this whole Dougie Jones storyline and all this here. Like in my head, I was like, I know it's 18 episodes. He's gonna get around to it, him and Mark Frost. But initially, I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know. And then that episode 8, it was like, this is it. You know, this is how evil came into the world through David Lynch's eyes in this world of Twin Peaks. And that whole episode was just mesmerising to watch, because I remember sitting like in an armchair beside the TV, and it was fairly close. It was like just a few feet in front of me, and you see like the nuclear bomb go off. You see the guys, Godelight, the sort of I can't remember their name, but the woodsman. Thank you. You see them, and then the imagery of like the moth frog thing coming out of the girl's mouth. You're like, I have no idea what the fuck's happening here.
But what about you, ladies and gentlemen? 9 Inch Nails.
You cannot start an episode better than with the 9 Inch Nails. Oh yeah, because in the start as well, with Evil Coop having his guts like fixed together again by the woodsman. Yeah, it's just fantastic. But yeah, then the return as it goes on, and how it, again, going back to how it recontextualizes Fire Walk with Me, and how there's no change in inevitability in a sense with it, even though you can distort time and reality. There's still no change in it. There is just the true path that someone's to go in life, and there's no real change in that as such. And the ending of that compared to the ending of the series, it annoyed me initially, but the more you think about it and the more it sort of resonates with you, you're like, no, that is the perfect ending for Twin Peaks. Is sort of maybe downbeat as you might interpret it, but it's the one that makes sense in the end.
Yeah, I know some did find it melancholy in its sense. Adam, just before we kind of move on from Twin Peaks: The Return,
I think there's some stuff in The Return that's better than any movie that's ever been made in the last 30 years. The scene,
even Mrs. Webb.
I did like the bit in Mrs. Webb when she takes a drink of her Pepsi, and then she goes, ugh, and then the guy walks in and he goes, sorry, there's a fish in the percolator. In my Pepsi later. When Bobby walks in and sees the photo of Laura Palmer for the first time in the police station, chills. Whenever Big Ed and
Nora, is it?
Nora,
I think it's Nora. I'm sorry if we've got it wrong.
Finally have a kiss towards the end after 3 seasons of them not getting together. Fuck me, it's so good. And then whenever Dale Cooper finally says, I am the FBI, or whatever he says, he's like, we need to call the FBI. And he goes, I am the FBI. And he gives the guy the thumb up after like 16 episodes of not having any Dale Cooper.
Tears.
Yeah, literally. It's so good. And he rings the police station and he's like, tell him to stick the coffee pot on. We're on our way. And you're like, yay.
What I loved about Twin Peaks: The Return, other than what you've both mentioned, was for a little while. I know I've probably had shows since for different reasons I've been excited about for waiting each week. But in the sense that initially when I think it was Sky Atlantic, was it HBO? Picked it up? Showtime, but it would have been on Sky here. It was that sense, whether it was a Friday night or whatever night it was, I was in Belfast, didn't have Sky, and I remember kind of coming down. And if it was around the weekend, I'm going to say it was Friday or maybe Sky Plus in it. And by that time, my dad was still with us, but he'd had a stroke and he didn't have the attention span for something like Twin Peaks: The Return by that point. But just kind of coming home and watching that late at night in my mum's house. And at times, particularly the opening, 4 or 5 episodes with various bits and bobs that are going on. It has been a wee while since I've watched it. Just kind of being like, how is this all going to come together? And like you watching it, Joe, is kind of, it does come together, and it doesn't maybe initially come back in a satisfying way that you maybe thought you want, but then you hit the nail on the head earlier on. It's David Lynch and Mark Frost, as we should say as well. David Lynch, he doesn't feel, comparing, just because I've mentioned it, the X-Files. The X-Files, they felt the need. It's like, well, okay, we've Mulder and Scully. Well, I know we've kind of worked. We have to have them back together again. We have to have it this, that, and the other. Lynch will do things, but you don't. I think he does them for himself as opposed to a fan wank, bar the better use of a word. I think things make sense to him. If that makes sense for you.
He also, like Twin Peaks, the first 2 seasons are, not parodies, but they are soap operas. They were was popular at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas The Return was coming in after stuff like Breaking Bad and Mad Men, where he was taking the approach of what dramas had sort of become in the 21st century, and they are just the bleakest shit in the world, no matter...
digital prestige TV.
Yeah.
That sort of look.
And he just sort of brought that and his vision together, and sort of... Twin Peaks The Return, even watching it the first time, never felt... I was counting down the episodes, because I never wanted it at the end. But yeah, it has the end, and it sort of gets to that point towards the actual end of The Return, where everybody is like smiling and cheering, but there's an overlay of Kyle MacLachlan's face just being like melancholy the whole time. And you're like, oh fuck.
And there was still another episode after that, wasn't there? Yeah. So that's where you're like, what?
But the musical performances, the acting performances, people like Matthew Lillard giving some of the best acting you've ever seen on TV. They bring back James, and he sings a song again, and it's not terrible.
Yeah, like the way it says James was always cool. It's like, was he?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're like, you know what? I'll let you have that.
And then bring in new characters like Robert Nepper and Jim Belushi.
Oh, the Las Vegas gangsters.
Yeah.
Some people are just stressed out.
Yeah, love that bit.
And then the British guy with the green hand, and you're like, what's that about? That'll never pay off. By Jove, it does.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think we will all agree Twin Peaks, I think the original two series and Twin Peaks The Return, you can seek it out in physical media. I know I have the same box set as you as Twin Peaks, the goldy kind of coloured one, and then of Twin Peaks The Return. I know there's like a complete Twin Peaks box set with, is it Twin Peaks Missing Pieces as well, and I think Fire Walk With Me is included in that box set.
It's in a tasty Blu-ray, which I think is on sale on Amazon.
I think there's one like Z to A Twin Peaks or something like that.
Z to A is everything with like the books and stuff, but there's the Fire Walk With Me, Missing Stuff, and the two first seasons is in a nice like you take the thing apart and it's Dougie and Mr. C.
Oh, nice.
It's very nice.
And as I say, it's available on Paramount Plus. If you have that subscription service, it's there. Not Fire Walk With Me, I don't think it's on Paramount Plus.
But there's a tasty 4K of it on Criterion.
There we go. So we've done some recommendations for physical media. So that's Twin Peaks. That's over and done with. Let's move on. And I know we've had a few, and we haven't given ourselves much time this week from recording to putting out on social media. So we've got a few comments. Cinematically, and I know we've already mentioned Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, but we'll move on to some of his films. I guess the obvious jumping on point, I know QFT are going to be screening it. Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
I think we'll start there, and before we do, I think we'll play a short clip.
Why are there people like Frank? Why is there so much trouble in this world?
I don't know. I had a dream. In fact, it was the night I met you. In the dream, there was our world, and the world was dark because there weren't any robins, and the robins represented love. And for the longest time, there was just this darkness, and all of a sudden, thousands of robins were set free, and they flew down and brought this blinding light of love. And it seemed like that love would be the only thing that would make any difference. And it did. So I guess it means there is trouble till the robins come.
You're a neat girl.
So are you. You're a neat guy.
So that's a clip of Blue Velvet. a pretty straightforward David Lynch movie. I remember, I think it was re-released one of the numerous times it was being screened for some reason. Neil Swedgwick, formerly of Films and Faith, I still know is involved with Cinepunkt. We got him down for the TV show to review Blue Velvet, and he hated it. He said it's typical Lynch. It doesn't make sense. And I was like, it makes straightforward sense. It's in terms of some of Lynch's later films, I come back to Inland Empire, maybe to an extent, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway. It makes sense. It's awkward a moment, and I know I'm looking forward to rewatching it at the QFT, but I'm not looking forward to that sequence with Dennis Hopper and Isabella Rossellini, because for me it's on a par, but not as tough as that sequence from Irreversible.
Sorry, you said Isabella Rossellini's name wrong. It's Itchy Bitchy Much Appreciated.
See, back to our Christmas special.
Yes.
But no, Blue Velvet, great film. Again, we have Kyle MacLachlan, we have Laura Dern, we have Isabella Rossellini, and Dennis Hopper, and
Dean Stockwell.
And Dean Stockwell, indeed. And do you know what it reminds me of? I should put it up on our feed again. We, many years ago, did I don't know if, Joe, you were involved with us at that point. I know you weren't, Adam. We did like an In Dreams season at the Beanbag. Yeah. And one of the bits of art, it was Gerard Torbett, formerly of this parish, or just a regular artistic contributor that we used to use. I'm not sure what Gerard's doing nowadays, but I got this idea for a mashup of doing Freddy Krueger, but in the Dean Stockdale singing Blue Velvet. And I must put it up again on our Facebook feed for the release of this pod. But just a fab film, apart from that rather awkward Daddy Wants to Fuck.
Yeah, for me, it was like, you remember I said I got the box set afterwards. This was the first film I put on, and even watching that, I was like, whoa, this is fairly heavy going stuff. Because the start of it, it's very noirish. It's basically Kyle MacLachlan comes home. His dad's he's injured badly. I think he had a stroke or something when he was doing a bit of gardening. And he finds this ear on his way back from the hospital. So that's the hook.
And also, I mean, the opening sequence of Blue Velvet is amazing in terms of that idea of show, don't tell. Show, don't tell, but just kind of set the whole idea of what this film's all going to be out. You have the horrible kind of worms, etc. Close up of them. I don't think it's maggots.
It's like beetles and ants eating each other.
The close up of them and this kind of chaotic, nasty, horrible sequence, and then it kind of camera pulls out, or I think it pulls out, and then it's just this nice.
Oh, it's the opposite of that. It's basically you start with the
apologies.
The white picket fence, roses, firefighters waving and stuff like that, and the song Blue Velvet's playing, everything's nice and happy, and then the accident happens, and then you zoom into the grass and you see the dark undercurrent. So that sets the tone for the whole film perfectly.
Fab piece of filmmaking. And as I say, it's just a wonderfully weird film. Isabella Rossellini, I'm not going to keep up that.
No.
She is amazing in that role. As is Hopper as well.
Oh, he's just pure. No, what was it? There's a great story about how he got the role. I think he was like pestering Lynch, and he called him one night in that mode, and he said, "I am Frank Booth," and he's like, "Okay," and he just cast him. Yeah. But typical Lynch and Hopper sort of story in that way.
Yeah. Are you a Blue Velvet fan, Adam?
Yeah, and I remember watching it in my flat with my flatmate. We had like a wee small room that was maybe about a quarter the size of the studio. It was just had a sofa and a TV. It was a proper like lads den, and I had both of us had just watched Mulholland Drive, and I was like, by the way, because the guy, my roommate at the time, he would never have watched anything like that, but Mulholland Drive, he was like, that was really interesting. Like that had my brain going the whole time. I want to watch something else like that. And I was like, Blue Velvet's on Netflix. Let's watch Blue Velvet. And sort of two lads getting to this Isabella Rossellini scene and just sort of awkwardly being like, this is just really sad. what's happening here. But visually, Blue Velvet, I think, is maybe Lynch's most gorgeous thing he's ever
Again,
shot.
the use of the colour palette is amazing.
Like Laura Dern's introduction.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Laura Dern and Kyle MacLachlan just walking down the street. Down in the neighbourhood with like it's just the lights sort of on and it keeps going.
What's her line about she had a dream?
About the Robin?
Yeah.
Like some people, that sort of cuts back to Lynch being like, people saying, oh, it's worked very cheesy in that there's dialogue. I'd never see it that way because I think he's very honest and earnest in the way he tells the story, and you see it, it's true as work. But if you were to sort of isolate that scene or any scene out of context, you'd be like, well, that's stupider. But
come back to Twin Peaks. There's sequences in Twin Peaks.
Exactly.
You get even like there's people that will like just because I know through TikTok because we're not. Well, I know it's not banned in the States anymore. All of what. Even 5 hours or 10 hours, I think it was down. But you kind of so many of those kind of little TikToks, I guess, best way to call it. There's like the sequence in Twin Peaks where Lynch shows up, and you see Lynch in the coffee shop, and it's silly and funny, and you go, oh fuck, is that Twin Peaks? Like, yeah, it is kind of Twin Peaks, but there's so much
you
more.
Remind me of a small Mexican chihuahua.
Yeah, when you take stuff out of context, anything, I guess that can happen to anything, but. What I love about Lynch, particularly in his films, is how he takes his reuse of actors, but he will reuse actors that he knows in one film can be this, and then in the next film, right, you're going to be... It's not recasting the same role.
Yeah.
I guess there's some you could maybe argue against, but like look at Laura. Well, Laura Dern is a fucking amazing actor anyway.
Yeah, like she goes from the sweet... innocent
Femme
girl
Fatale
next
and Wild
door,
at Heart,
and then Wild at Heart, Femme Fatale, and then even in The Return, her version of Diane, it's completely different than that, and in that part, it's always different.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about it. He knows how to push filmmaker, or he knows how to push actors, maybe not in a way of like in a nasty way, but he's able to kind of say, I can see you doing this, but also from listening to interviews, particularly with Naomi Watts, talks about kind of, I think he has his idea, but he's willing to collaborate and say, right, well, this is what, Joe, you're going to bring to this role. Adam, this is what you're going to bring. This is what I have, but this is what I want you to do. But I just think that's fab. Like you look at, I don't know, was what Wild at Heart was after? It was released right after Blue Velvet, I think,
It was in the middle of Twin Peaks.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think it was after the first season. I think it was the studios were pushing Lynch to do something different with Twin Peaks, and he sort of got a bit fed up, so he left the show for a bit. That's when there was a bit of decline, then he came back and things improved a bit. It was basically him just taking a bit of a hiatus from Twin Peaks.
Yeah. Because it's just, when you look at them, it's like, you go in that, like, though the difference in those two characters, like, again, Laura Dern, good actor. Who'd have known it? Jacques Carr, but... Yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you want to move on from Blue Velvet? Do you want to, like I've mentioned Wild at Heart? Do you want to move on to that, or
I think just Dennis Hopper in that movie sort of created doing like a movie like The Dark Knight. The Heath Ledger's Joker would not exist if you didn't have Frank Booth.
Yeah, because he's like the epitome of evil.
Yeah,
and it's in a domestic sort of setting.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
And Dennis Hopper sort of after that role sort of had villain-esque roles, of course, classically Super Mario Brothers, but Speed and stuff, where people were sort of chasing that like embodiment of evil because they're like, he's just a bad man. Whereas like before that, he was sort of just a good guy in things. You know what I mean? You know, he was a bit of a scumbag, but he was a good guy in things. Where I think, whenever you recommend Lynch to people, they do two things. Where do you start? Because, like, what do you recommend? You don't really recommend Blue Velvet first. It's very heavy.
You'd probably go maybe, well, even Elephant Man, it might be a bit too dry for people initially thinking, what's this? But Straight Story, it's sort of similar in that way. It's like two sort of...
Fuck it, throw them in the deep end, Inland Empire.
Oh, 100%. If you can get through that, you can get through it.
If you can swim through that, you're fine.
I actually would say Blue Velvet is your entry point because it has that sort of like Lynchian moments and qualities to it, but it is a very tough watch at the same time.
I suppose if you're mature enough to get through the sort of the bad sort of core of what's happening to Isabella Rossellini, then you've probably got a strong enough stomach to do the rest. Not to say that Lynch, does it just for the giggles and shits of
No, he does not.
being bad to people. No. But then again, like I was going to say, the second point people don't understand about Lynch, and if you've got this far, you're probably a Lynch fan, but if you're not a Lynch fan listening, here's the easiest way to understand Lynch. His movies are jigsaw puzzles, but the picture is just a circle. They're simple plots. You could sum up Blue Velvet easily. You could sum up Lost Highway easily.
Even Inland Empire.
Yeah, Inland Empire easily.
A woman stars in a cursed film.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
But like people, it's like, remember when Lost came out and people would be like, I can't watch that because I get fucking lost.
There's the polar bear.
You don't get lost. You just are short attention spans. But with Lynch, sort of also, I know Brian Holland tweeted in that Wild at Heart is the best version of The Wizard of Oz, which I completely agree with him on.
It is though. When you, like,
apart from The Wiz. Come on, kids.
Oh, of course, apart from The Wiz and The Wizard of Oz too.
Yeah.
Back to Oz?
Yeah.
Oh, Return to Oz.
The search for Curly's gold.
There we go. Yeah, so where are we now?
Yeah,
it's typical Lynch fashion. Where are we now?
Yeah, where are we now? Who are we? I feel like three people, we should walk out and three different people should come back in kind of Lost Highway.
I get our doppelgangers.
Fashion. Lost Highway, there was another one. Again, I love the soundtrack for Lost Highway. And again, because limited time in prep for the pod, limited kind of time in time of world events as we go to record this and various bits and bobs with my own work commitments and bits and as I say, I haven't had a chance to rewatch as much. Lost Highway is one, and I know that's on the QFT, and again, that's another one I've never seen on the big screen before, and that's one I'm very tempted to. Again, I don't know if it's one for me and my lovely wife, and it's, let me get it right, Paxton.
Oh no, Pullman.
You always get them mixed up. I was going to do it.
You always mix them up.
I was going to do it, of course. Bill Pullman, fab performance.
Yeah. And Patricia Arquette's amazing as well, and Robert Loggia.
Oh, yeah. Loggia getting angry at the guy. Fuck.
But did you ever see a bit of a sidetrack? I know we're going tangents. Did you ever see his like orange juice commercial?
Yeah, because Family Guy take the piss out of it.
Yeah, but no, it was a genuine ad. It's like this child was like, I don't want to drink my orange juice. And then like Robert Loggia just walks in her kitchen like, Robert Loggia? He's like, drink your orange juice. Your mama says you gotta drink it.
I do love the Family Guy joke.
Yeah.
R for Robert Loggia.
O
for,
like that.
Oh,
my God, that's Robert Loggia.
But yeah, going back, what were you saying about the scene where he gets angry at the...
Yes, so there's a bit of road rage, and he gets out of the car, and for a movie that is full of extremes, here comes this man being, maybe feels like a Lemmy sketch, being the fucking craziest man you've ever seen in all your life, beating a guy up with a tire iron.
Aye, it's fantastic. Oh, and we Richard Pryor's in as well.
Yeah.
I forgot that.
Which is strange. Richard Pryor. He's a guy that I would like to do a season on for like being in different movies that aren't
Superman 3.
Like Blue Collar?
Like Blue Collar and stuff. Like he's in great stuff. Vampires of Brooklyn.
But no,
Brewster's Millions?
Yes. Great fun.
But back to Lost Highway.
No, we're lynching. We're going down Richard Pryor deep dive now.
I was going to get back to that.
Just to tie Lynch into Family Guy, by the way. David Lynch.
The Christmas?
A ongoing regular character on the Cleveland Show.
Oh yeah,
he's in every episode, pretty much.
Yeah, he's the bartender, isn't he? Yeah. I forgot about that.
Just that voice, and when you look at his, I'm assuming it was Instagram or social media reels, just as kind of like what he was talking about, dreams or what he thought about. Watching them back, it's lovely because there's this innocence about Lynch when you hear him. And I was watching his speech when he got the honorary award at the Academy Award, and just kind of a very, very humble person in that sense.
It's like 11 words, wasn't it, the speech?
Like,
pretty much.
You've all very interesting faces. Thank you very much.
Oh no, I think he looks at the statue. Isn't that what he looks at the Oscars? And you have an interesting face.
Oh, I thought he was talking to the audience.
Maybe I'm wrong. I could be.
No,
I
you're
could,
probably right.
I could well be wrong.
It's the guy from A Different Man in the front. Not a person. You've got a very interesting face, right? See it?
But even the behind the scenes stuff and the return when he gets frustrated, it's even funny.
Great.
It was like he's doing something with model. He goes, plaster Paris bullshit.
Do you ever see the behind the scenes video where he takes styrofoam and a knife and he's cutting, and he goes, a dildo?
I have watched one recently. I think it's him and Naomi Watts. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to give her motivation. He's like, slap me.
Yeah.
Slap me. She's like, I can't. It's like, oh, God bless you. As it like the DOP or someone behind him, just fucking.
Oh no, it's Cam McLaughlin. Because he had a big coat in him. That's why you can recognise him.
I don't know if I can find it very quickly here, but just the tribute from Cam McLaughlin.
Kale. That's a lower hang. I love him. His nicknames for people. He called him Kale. Nicolas Cage, he called him a Nixter, and Laura Dern Tippett.
Yes, I see he's filming Inland Empire, and the camera's up, and she's down below, and he's like, "I love you, Tippett." And I love you, David. I love you, Tippett. But then that follows into him, like somebody's like trying to set up a scene, and he just turns and he goes, "The fuck, waiting for?"
I did also love. I forget what film it was on. Was it Twin Peaks Return? Is it one of the ones on set behind us talking about the scene? Is it dragging?
Too long.
Is it taking too long? And
he's like, who gives a fuck?
Who properly loses the battle?
That's why I think he purposely had the brush scene. It's like, no, just gonna keep that.
Yeah. And also one of the best scenes, not to go back to the return, but one of the best scenes is someone going, "Did you have the dream about what do you call her, Monica Bellucci in Paris again?"
Yeah. If you've creative control in that manner, you're going to say you have a dream about Monica Bellucci and then have her part of your episode?
Do you know why that's there?
No.
Because it was not half, but like a lot of it was financed by a French company. So they were like, you have to shoot some of it in Paris. And they went to Paris, and Monica Bellucci was just there. And he was like, "Do you want to..."
What be in Twin Peaks The Return?
She said, "Absolutely."
Anything for you, David.
For all intents and purposes, all of the tributes, like with Kyle MacLachlan and Naomi Watts and all, and I know it's one of those things where when someone dies, everybody comes out and says nice things about him, but before even Lynch died, any story you ever heard about him, he was just a really nice man.
Yeah, everyone loved working with him, working on his sets and that.
The only person that he didn't get on with was Sherilyn Vey.
I think so.
Wasn't it? Like they sort of...
They fell out, but
George
they came
Lucas,
back together
maybe?
again.
They came back together again. Yeah.
Lucas,
like, nice...
Did they fall out? Did he fall out with Lucas? Was
George
that one
Lucas?
point?
Oh, because fucking Lucas showed him a picture of an Ewok and gave him a headache.
I was searching there frantically for, and I don't think we can read it all out. It's a long, rightfully so, but it's a long. I'm looking here. It's like maybe about 6. You just put it up. It's like 6, but just the opening. I love the story. Cal McLaughlin, how David Lynch invented me. No, I didn't always understand what we were making. Sometimes I'd get a sense of it, and then, like on a breeze, it was gone. Other times it seemed to exist on a plane that I wanted to reach but couldn't quite articulate. But eventually I realised it didn't matter. Through my lifelong friend, collaborator, mentor, David Lynch was as eloquent as anything I'd ever met, and a brilliant writer. He was not necessarily a word person. I think he just found them insufficient, one-dimensional, not up to the job. It's why I never wanted to explain his work. He wasn't trying to be surly or obtuse. That was never David's way. He loved connecting with people, meeting them where they were, sharing time or space or consciousness. It's just that explaining his art after the fact seemed antithetical to the very point of making it. I sat in interviews and on panels next to him and could see him struggling with questions about what things meant. Often I felt compelled to pick up the baton and talk in circles for a bit until the questioner moved on. David knew that anything he said would be putting his thumb on the scale, and he wanted people to experience his work on their own and take away what they wished. If words were sufficient, why would he have to spend the effort and the time and the millions of dollars making it? Wouldn't words have been so much easier? David didn't fully trust words because they pinned the idea in place. They were a one-way channel that didn't allow for the receiver, and he was all about the receiver. This distrust of words created a unique challenge for him on set. As a director's job, it's all about communication with the producers, the executives, the craftspeople, and of course the actors. David got around this by inventing his own peculiar way of talking to actors. I wonder if that's why he liked to work with the same ones. Me, Laura Dern, Jack Nance, Harry Dean Stanton, Naomi Watts. We understood his secret language. And I've read it a couple of times, actually. It was lovely. And as I say, there again, he talks about 40 years ago. For reasons beyond my comprehension, David Lynch plucked me out of obscurity to star in his first and last big budget movie. He clearly saw something in me that even I didn't recognise. I owe my entire career and life really to his vision. What I saw in him was an enigmatic and intuitive man with a creative ocean bursting forth inside of him. He was in touch with something the rest of us wish we could get to.
Yeah,
lovely. And I mean, it goes on. There's a couple of post Candle Gloughlin's put up. It's lovely.
Where compared to Isabel Rossellini, he's like, I loved him.
Yes,
but that sums it up just as much, you know.
It's weird that she put up the clip from Celebrity Big Brother of David's dead. Where did she put that up?
Yes, classic.
But yes, I think we were talking, and we were at Lost Highway, and I kind of went off on a little tangent.
Lost Highway, like you say, soundtrack fantastic, visuals fantastic. It also has one of those creepy moments with the guy with the camera.
Yep.
And he's like, if I'm in front of you, how am I talking to you on the phone?
Yeah, he's like, call your house now.
Yeah, and it is one of those movies that on face value you're like, why does he turn into Balthazar Getty's? Like why does he just turn into a different person? Yeah. And it's like I say, Jigsaw, but it's a full picture. Yeah, he has to turn into a different person. That's it.
Yeah, like it's basically, I know you can interpret it as like he committed this murder, so his whole reality is completely shattered. That he starts a new life.
Yeah,
in the century, because that's why you have the alternate version of Patricia Arquette's character and all that. That's the way you can interpret it. But with Lynch's films, you're meant to like feel and experience them. Yeah. Like the more you ask questions and the more frustrated you get, you're sort of losing sight.
Yeah, it's like what Cal McLaughlin said. His idea, yeah. Like he found words constricting. It's like he's a painter as well. He's a painter. I mean, Lynch. He's also a composer as well. He's an artist, and I guess that sense, like visually, I can tell a story through visual medium as opposed to just film. And look at the PlayStation 2 ad.
That's what I said on Twitter. It's like you can create. So, like he had a unique take, and he was just given vibes and. It wasn't just gameplay of a game. He went, this is like a new
dimension,
like welcome to the fourth place or whatever.
Wasn't a duck that said that?
A duck, yeah. And a guy that's like all in bandages and stuff. And it's like spicy advertisements. And Lynch, weirdly, a massive commercial director, does like Dior average and stuff, like stuff you would never think he would ever do. But he understood how it's like obviously advertising for him sort of is perfect because he can get a vibe across of how it feels to own this thing or use this thing. The Dior adverts are great because he's literally trying to visualize how it smells.
Yeah,
and that's fantastic. And I think like that was probably my first introduction to Lynch without me even knowing it. Was like those old.
You know, it probably wasn't a PlayStation ad for me, but I didn't realize that was David Lynch.
But you still remembered it.
Was he a music video? Did he do a couple of music videos? 9 Inch Nails, he's definitely done.
Wicked Game.
Yeah.
Came Back Haunted was one of the recent ones he done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, Chris Isaac in, just like, no, it's funny, Chris Isaac in Firewalk With Me, when they ring him and it's just a shot of him answering the phone and people get arrested outside a school bus.
Oh yeah, the screaming of the children on the bus and everything. So that's the moment actually, but that sums up perfectly where it's like, it's humorous, but there's something a bit off. The fact that all
it's
the
dark humor.
Screaming.
It's much darker.
Yeah. But not to go back to.
We've mentioned a few films. I guess people will be surprised. I know we've mentioned briefly Mulholland Drive. We mentioned very briefly Inland Empire, but Eraserhead.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about the poster. Adam for that. The poster. I mean, I was aware of the film through the poster because I remember coming up to Queen's. I'm sure they still do it. Old Man in the Room. When I don't know what you guys, university or going, even just being away from home. Posters, movie posters. Queen's used to do the movie the poster sale, and I don't know if I bought it, but I remember being aware, as you mentioned, the Eraserhead poster before ever seeing Eraserhead. A wonderfully weird, bizarre, trippy film. And again, it has been a while since I watched it. The last time I saw it, we talked about this in a recent pod, was Belfast Film Festival. There was a tour of an alternative score for the film. And because I don't have the same relationship to Eraserhead as, like, say, a film like Donnie Darko, like I mentioned before, where the song, Eraserhead, the music is an important part of it, without a doubt. But I don't have that same emotional connection to it because it's it's a weird, dreamlike, trippy film, bizarre, unsettling, uncomfortable. I quite like that. In the same way I wasn't as uncomfortable when I watched, I was going to say Dante's Peak. I wasn't so uncomfortable when I was watching the Donnie Darko alternative score or the Drive alternative score.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, gentlemen, feel free, talk about Eraserhead.
Well, when I first seen it, I was like, the fuck's this? But
in a good way.
Yes. Yeah, not to say it in a negative manner, but again, going back to Adam's thing, what's it about? He's like, it's a man struggling being a father. That's it.
Yeah. Having a sick kid.
Yeah.
Which Lynch at the time did.
That's right, yes. Recently we rewatched it again, QFT, with my friend Jason, who got me into Twin Peaks, but Jason's an awful habit. When he goes to QFT, he's like, oh, there's beer here. So he always says, let's go early, and you're sort of forcing it down a load of cans. So I wouldn't recommend watching Razorhead.
The cans in with you.
Yeah. It's like, I don't recommend watching Razorhead with a few beers.
No.
Because it was like, oh God. I was like, I never want to be a father.
I remember watching it maybe on a bit of the old Mary Jane, shall we say.
Oh, boy.
And that being just a head melt.
No, I was... even when you watch, like, the imagery, like when his head gets removed and it becomes a razor, stuff like that, you're like, the fuck? It's like a bit like... This is going to be a weird comparison. It's like a dark It's a Wonderful Life in a way, in terms of like this ethereal sort of idea of another world.
The Christmas classic.
No, you know what I mean?
Know
like the otherworldly sort of qualities to it, especially when you have that like man working the machines of...
It's like It's a Wonderful Life if he did die at the end.
Yeah, it's like Clarence, I'm dead, and a weird man with a gear, and he's switching them.
I'm in the radiator, but everything's all right.
Mary,
it's all right. It's all good.
Yeah.
Adam,
I fucking love Eraserhead, and it's one of those things. Getting older, like we're all saying, you sort of realize not even what it's about, but like sort of him trying to grow into maturity as a husband or a father or just a man who's just trying to live his life, and you know he gets into these awkward situations, and it is really funny when he goes and sees his girlfriend's parents and they're eating that weird chicken that bleeds, but like the mum like gets up crying into the kitchen and the dad deadpan goes, she'll be alright.
But you know when he's doing it, there's like one of them's like retching the whole time. They're like, and you're like, what the fuck's going on?
And it's like, I sort of get where he's going, because sometimes you go to, you know, a girlfriend's house and you're like, oh, the parents are just going to be normal. And then just being, you know, they're like, oh, do these weird tics, are they going to evolve into my girlfriend or into my kid? And for Lynch to sort of bring his life into the movie, because it took so long to make, that he sort of went through a marriage and got divorced and had a kid while making the whole thing. And it's sort of Jennifer Lynch was born with a cleft foot,
cleft lip, is it?
Cleft palate.
That's the term.
I think it was either that or, do you know when you've got a foot problem, I don't remember what that's called.
A clubfoot?
A clubfoot. I think it's a clubfoot.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the Lynch being like, I don't know what the fuck I do here. Like, I'm a painter. I don't have any other job. I'm making this film. I'm sort of putting. He would sleep on set. Jack Nance, don't cut your hair for 5 years. Yep.
No, he's looking like, I was like, I've had this hair for 5 years.
And it is sort of like, if this didn't turn out for him, he probably just would have went back to his hometown and just raised a kid and been a painter. And it is sort of like, he probably would have been happy doing that. You know, he probably would have made the one movie and just went, yeah, I did it.
Yeah, but going back to that, if you watch the documentary The Art Life, which is basically about Lynch's life up until the making of Eraserhead, he talks about that a lot. And, you know, I really recommend, you know, if you want to get a better understanding of Lynch as a person, watch that documentary. It's fantastic. It's just him telling stories and smoking for about an hour and a half.
Although there is one story he tells about growing up, and he gets halfway through the story and just stops.
He's like, I can't finish that.
He can't finish that.
And then one of the stories about the inspiration for Blue Velvet, about this naked woman screaming running down the street.
Yeah.
But no, not the sidetrack Razorhead, but he talks about that and how it was his one and only shot. It's like, I either do this and it works out, and if it doesn't, then it's not going to work out.
And gladly, the director of Dead and Loving It was
Dead and Loving It? Well, Alive and Loving It.
Was in a screening and thought, I need this kid.
Do the Elephant Man.
Yeah, The Elephant Man's another one. It's the film that it suits. You look back, of course, it fits within Lynch's back catalogue, but it feels, when you sit and watch it, it's a very different film.
Yeah, it's a straightforward story.
It's a studio movie, I guess, if you want to call it, of sorts, but with elements of Lynch.
Yeah. No,
I don't know whether you'd agree with that or not. It's a studio picture, and it's John Hurt, isn't it? Just with an amazing performance.
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. I just wanted to be in the room when Lynch was like, probably heard studio notes about like, we need to show off, you know, like John Hurt and see what it looks like, and Lynch just going, why don't we overlay footage of elephants, and then people will get it.
But at the same time, wasn't it a case of Mel Brooks protected him a lot in that film?
Yeah.
Like, he was the producer going, no, leave him to it. He knows what he's doing. Yeah.
Because you always love that. Because I was listening to an interview. I think Mel Brooks was talking about that. And it's weird and wonderful. Like, Robert Zemeckis is a producer on Nosferatu, I think, if I'm right.
Was it Chris Columbus? Sorry.
Chris Columbus,
yes,
sorry. Chris Columbus, sorry. I apologise. It's always weird when you kind of see when kind of either an actor or director pops up as a producer somewhere. And you're like, how did that relationship work out? How did that go down? And I mean, I can't. It's been that long since I heard the interview. I can't remember where it was. I might have been on Simon Brew's Film Stories. I think they were talking about that with Mel Brooks, and just as you say, just weird and wonderful how kind of various kind of two icons of cinema. Mel Brooks, just you think of parody and you think of comedy, but getting involved with this project.
Yeah, and it's just the thing about The Elephant Man that really sticks is just how moving it is.
Yeah,
as a film, you know, and the ending always just shakes you up. And a lot of people are sharing that scene, you know, where his mother's speaking and back down, no one ever really dies, and it's just absolutely powerful stuff. Yeah. The fact that it's in black and white for was it 1980? Yeah, 1980.
Yeah,
and
the fact that Mel Brooks is like, yeah, he knows what he's doing, make it black and white.
And the fun fact of Lynch wanted to do the practical effects himself, and did it on John Hurt. And John Hurt came to set, and even Lynch said himself, "Oh, like shite, we're probably going to get someone else in to do this."
Yeah, because the other thing, if him doing the hands-on thing, that's why Eraserhead took so long.
Yeah,
because he took his time with it. He doesn't have that luxury.
Yeah, and I coming back to that point, you and I guess this is conjecture because we don't have Mel Brooks here, we don't have David Lynch here, sadly, anymore. But Brooks is a filmmaker, and I guess there's that sense. Filmmakers, you know, game sees game, to quote what the kids are saying. When you have a film person as opposed to a money guy with a producer. It needs to be this and that, and kind of that old idea. I think is at the head of Sony in the book I was rereading not so long ago, where it talks about movies, but particularly in the late 90s, action movies they had the whammo. I think it's the whammo scale, the whammo factor, which like every 15 minutes you have to have an action sequence, has to move on the plot. That's where you look at Hudson Hawk. That's where you get that kind of thing. It's a film I love. It's a flawed film, but it's a film that I love. But I guess maybe when you get a producer like Mel Brooks in, who is a filmmaking person, who's someone coming back, both director, producer, writer, actor as well, he's going to have the confidence to have your back in those big calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I know that's just pure Jim McClean conjecture. I don't know.
It must have been nice for Lynch, really, to have someone so out there as Mel Brooks, because I don't think Lynch would have survived. You know, he is sort of holds himself to himself, and you know, he might not have had the career he had if he didn't have that mentorship with Mel Brooks, because obviously Mel Brooks is a force on his own that can just fucking push through everything, and yeah, he has the accolades to push other people up. But obviously with Eraserhead doing so well in the Midnight Scene and Elephant Man doing well, you know, it's sort of opened up that avenue where you can have people like
two different audiences you're bringing in,
but you can have people like John Waters make the leap.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's sort of like once Lynch was through, the floodgates were open for other. You wouldn't have like the independent 90s movement if you didn't have someone like Mel Brooks letting Lynch in the late 70s.
It's only because it's popped into my head. I'm only going to give the comparison. It's probably not a great comparison. You look at a filmmaker like Ben Wheatley, who makes films, you know, from start to finish, they are Ben Wheatley films. Then when Ben Wheatley makes the move into a big budget studio production with the Meg 2, you show me genuinely and honestly where there's enough of Ben Wheatley coming through in that film, as much to just, it's a product.
No, he's a hard hand
in the machine. Yeah. He gets that. Yeah, he knows that. I mean, I think his Tomb Raider film's dead in the in the ground.
True. But that was before even the Meg 2.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been interested to see that. But at least there, I know we're drawing comparisons and it's all conjecture from my behalf, but it's that sense of like, you look at that comparison there. I mean, you still see Lynch coming through within that film.
Oh yeah,
it's not a David Lynch film, and it's not that it's not a David Lynch film. It's a very different film. It stands out within his back catalogue. But when you sit down and watch it, it's a David Lynch film.
It's the one film too that probably out of like all of our parents they've watched.
Yeah.
If you were like David Lynch is dead, who did the Elephant Man? Oh yeah,
loved it. Good film.
Yeah.
Look, we've talked for over an hour, nearly an hour and a half. We've talked for nearly an hour and a half about that. We haven't really got round to Mulholland Drive. We've talked a little bit about Inland Empire, so I think we'll park Inland Empire. Weird, wonderful Lynch film, very kind of probably the most. You might disagree with me, Adam, in terms of accessibility. I think it's a film. I've made the point you need to be in the mood to watch it. Mm-hmm. I think, or you need to be prepared to kind of give yourself over and not expect to to be given or spoon fed the answers. It's a film where you as much has to kind of take stuff as in, it's been a while since I've watched it, isn't it? The whole stuff with mice in Inland Empire. Rabbits, sorry, yes, and that, and it's like, yeah, weird and wonderful, all stuff as with lights, etc. Laura Dern, great performance. You've said you're a big fan of it now after watching it in the cinema. You want to see it again.
Yeah, I'm still sort of on the fence, but I think I'll learn to appreciate it more if I see it again, because it's one of those things, like, there's a lot to take in within 3 hours. So
there is a lot to take in. It is a long watch at 3 hours, but Mulholland Drive.
I just want to say about Inland Empire, if you're a huge Terry Crews fan, Terry Crews turns up, so
he does. Yeah? He does indeed pop up. Maybe we can do a Terry Crews deep dive. Retrospective White Chicks.
Expendables 1 and 2.
Yes, indeed. So, Mulholland Drive.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh boy.
See what I mean?
Okay. So you had a dream about this place. Tell me.
Well, it's the second one I've had, but they're both the same. They start out that I'm in here, but it's not day or night. It's kind of half night, you know? But it looks just like this, except for the light. And I'm scared like I can't tell you. Of all people, you're standing right over there. By that counter. You're in both dreams. And you're scared. I get even more frightened when I see how afraid you are, and then I realize what it is. There's a man in back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall. I can see his face. I hope that I never see that face ever outside of a dream.
So this was a project started out as another potential TV show. Originally was going to be a pilot, or what it was. It started. They were making the pilot. The TV show fell through, if I'm correct, and then they kind of revamped it slightly, retooled it, and it became the film that we got to see at the big screen. As I mentioned, I'll not repeat the story. Watching it 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, very tired, after a lot of pizza and maybe some beer. Wonderfully weird, bizarre viewing experience. My 2 friends watching it around being like, what the fuck did we just watch? And I'm kind of like, I don't know. I could happily rewatch that again. And I've seen, of Lynch's films, it's probably the one I've seen the most at the cinema. QFT have rescreened it a couple of times. Definitely, as I say, didn't see it first time round. I think a few community cinema groups have screened it. I do love it. I know Mark Kermode talks about it making complete sense to him. First time round, well, I was 20? We're all naive and young at one point. Maybe didn't make. The more I watch it, it does make sense.
Yeah.
But at the time, I'm like, why the fuck are those little people at like 3:30 in the morning? Why the fuck are those little people just fucking running through underneath the stairs? What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. No, that's the funny thing about Mulholland Drive, before we get into it, is that's the one that finally clicked for Roger Ebert, because he was notoriously, even to his deathbed, said, I don't like Blue Velvet. And Lost Highway had famously in the posters like 2 thumbs down.
But I can get why someone wouldn't like Blue Velvet.
Oh, absolutely. No, I get that. And even Lost Highway.
We've talked about it. That sequence with Rossellini and Hooper, it leaves a mark. I come back to that point in the same way. It's memorable in the same way, like Irreversible, but nowhere near as tough. But still tough.
Yeah, it's still a very tough watch. But then he met him, I think it was in the red carpet for the Oscars, and Lynch is like, how you doing, Roger? And he's just awkwardly smiling. He's like, oh, we're gonna watch this in a film study class. We're gonna like study scene by scene by scene. And he's sort of standing there going, okay. And then just walks away. But Mulholland Drive, I watched it again the other night, and it's still a masterpiece. It's definitely one of those films, the more you watch it, the more you pick up on little things, because it is going back to what I'm saying, there is a straight line in that turns into a circle at the end. But the thing about it is, I did send in the group that picture of the DVD extra saying, oh, here's the clues to look out for. I think that's just Lynch having a laugh going, no.
Yeah. Don't forget to look at the key. You're like, what?
Like, I've looked at, there's keys all over the show. It makes not, I know what it does, but the one thing that really stood out, and it still scared me this time, was the guy explained the dream of what happened to him, and then outside the back of the Winkies.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's it's the most telegraphed jump scare that's genuinely terrifying still, because you're like, I know this is happening.
Is it Bob?
No, it's just another sort of
another similar kind of manifestation. Because I couldn't remember if it was the same actor or not, but it's not.
No, isn't it the woman, the nun?
It's the woman who's the nun.
Yeah.
Famously in Shiny Happy People music video.
Oh, fuck I.
Yeah, she's in the background, yeah. But back to Lynch. That scene, it's the most telegraphed scare you'll ever find, but it still scares the hell out of you. You're like, I know what's going to happen. He just explain what's going to happen. He's slowly taking yours, like, it's going to jump out in a second, it's going to jump out, jumps out, you're like, oh fuck.
New pair of underpants.
Yeah, 6 pairs. It's that bad.
Do you know what one of the scariest things about it is? Not even, it's before they see your woman. He explains to them, he says, I had a dream, and you're standing over there.
Yes.
And the scene goes on a little bit, and then the guy's sitting, and then he turns around, and he sees the other guy looking at him as if like, why are you looking at me? And he's realised, oh fuck, I'm in this dream. It's like, it can't be stopped. What is about to come?
Yeah, that's the thing about Lynch, going back to Lynch work, there is always an inevitability about things, and there's no change in whatever you're going to do, but it's just fantastic, right? And just anytime, like you said, Billy Ray Cyrus, Susie shows up, it's better that way. Fantastic. That bit's hilarious, just taking the jewellery, dumping the paint in there.
Yeah.
And then the cowboy, and I'm listing off things because there's so much to it.
The hitman who keeps mistakenly killing people.
That is one of the funniest scenes. Yeah, like rewatching again, I forgot how funny it was, and I was in kinks laughing at it. But then it all hits hard at the end. Once Naomi Watts' character, that shift over the time period, and then to see her stars sort of faded.
Yeah.
In that sense, and that final sequence, which you mentioned, it was like, what the fuck's them two small people? That's becomes terrifying with them chasing her down the hallway, but out of context, people poke fun at it, whatever. But yeah, it's great stuff.
I think, like me, from memory, the sequence, the silencio, that kind of going to the orchestra and listening to the music, and then isn't it Naomi Watts' character is reduced to tears?
Yeah, it's because it's crying in Italian, the Roy Orbison song.
Yeah. Oh, that is just in terms of just kind of visuals and kind of like what is going on here, this, that, other. It's for me just cinema without being artsy fartsy and gushy. It's just that sense that when I think of Mulholland Drive, that's the sequence I always think of. And that kind of, isn't it? The wall starts to shake, and kind of the sense of kind of realities kind of shifting. I love it, and I come back to that. It's the same way. I've talked about this before with various horror films. You crave that kick, like maybe at some point someone should just give me heroin, but it's that sense. You want to feel like that again, and I want to feel like sitting late at night in the village in South Belfast with 3 lads on a sofa, while I'm kind of going, what the fuck is this all about? And just, I come back to, you've mentioned it, Homer Simpson in the Twin Peaks. Brilliant. I have no idea what the fuck's going on, but I love this, and being enthralled by it and wanting to know more about it. And Lynch is that filmmaker. You want to know as much as you can about the film, but as we mentioned there briefly with Kyle MacLachlan, he never wanted to give you really answers. If he was asked a question, he'd be like, is this what you think? I think there's one on YouTube, I think it's YouTube or TikTok, where someone asks him this big, it's Mark Kermode.
He talks about electricity.
Yeah,
in his
he talks about this, that, and other. And is this what you think it means?
Would you like to elaborate?
Oh yeah,
no.
A Razorhead. It's Lynch starting off of going, Razorhead's my most spiritual film, and he goes, elaborate on that. No.
But I think it's a similar. Kermode's asking him.
Yeah, Kermode one. He's talking about electricity in his films.
Yeah,
and he goes on this big long tangent about it, and then he asks, is
that what you think?
And he just goes,
no. And that's what I love, Lynch. Adam, do you want to talk a bit more about Mulholland Drive before we wrap things up?
One of the funniest things in any movie is Angelo Badalamenti spitting out coffee onto
that scene's fantastic.
And then the guy from The Other Place, the little small bloke, is in a suit of a giant man they made, where his head is just
his head peeking out
the top. I think it's, like with all 3 of us have pretty much said, it is a masterpiece, and it's a movie, people talk about it being the middle of Lynch's like Hollywood trilogy, after Lost Highway and this and Inland Empire. And it is one of those ones, it is hard to wrap your head around, but once you sort of get in it and dig in it and know that Lynch wants you to feel how the character feels, and the desperation, especially the desperation of Hollywood itself, both coming from Naomi Watts' character and Irish
Laura
guy.
Hearn.
No, Irish guy from
Irish guy
from Charlie's Angels 2.
Justin Theroux.
Thank you. I was like, Cillian Murphy.
I'm gonna kick your arse.
That's
All
my
right,
girl.
Justin, calm down.
Justin Theroux, like the whole him throwing paint on the jewellery, but the paint being pink, is such a genius idea that maybe somebody else wouldn't really think of. You know, it's still like he's trying to be the man and he's doing something childish, but yet he's still covered himself in pink paint and he's wrecked a car and you know he's but even through all of that, he's a man in Hollywood, gets to keep his job, still gets to be the director. But the jitterbug sequence at the start, I think, is one of the best opening shots of any movie. It is one of those tests as well. If you're like, what the fuck is this? You're part of the rest of the film is probably not for you. Yeah. And then just the whole ending with Naomi Watts' character sort of, you know, the chickens come home to roost, and sadly it ends, and it sort of does end in the same sort of downbeat tone of Fire Walk With Me, but I think for general audiences, it's done better here. It's, you know, it's not as what's the word, out there, or, you know, it's very clear cut what has happened.
You don't have to
abstract. Thank you.
Yeah, you don't have to take as big a leap.
Yes.
As a viewer, you don't have to take. You might be confuddled by it, bamboozled by it, but by and large, you get it.
Yeah, and I think the crying scene, I will just watch solely, maybe once a week, because I think it's just a fantastic scene.
But it's all sort of like a nod to one of his favourite films. It's sort of his Sunset Boulevard.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
And a film that I said to you, Jim, watched recently for the first time, and it's funny to see how much, not even how much he takes from it, but just how much he loves that movie, and how much, probably watching that movie growing up, he fell in love with the studio system, even though he didn't fall into the studio system, but the idea of how a studio movie works, because Justin Theroux, when he's making his movie, it is very much a throwback. Yeah. You know, it is like a 50s, they're telling the story of the starlet from the 50s. And if you're an actor and you haven't, if you're, you know, listen to this and you're an actor and you haven't seen the movie, watch the Naomi Watts audition scene in that room, because that like monologue is just fucking, I keep being like, it's some of the best shit you'll ever see, but genuinely it's some of the best acting you'll ever see on screen.
Because when she practices the lines beforehand, you're like, this is really fucking stupid. When you hear them, but then in the audition, you're like, the context of this here, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing acting in that scene. Like,
yeah. An all-round good film, I think we would recommend. Look, very quickly, I know, I'm just very quickly checking the socials. I know that you've already mentioned Brown Mulholland. Give a big shout out to Wild at Heart. Our very own Kristen Lopp, regular kind of messenger, just talked about, I like most of Lynch's movies out of the ones I've seen. There we go. And he also has the Twin Peaks Blu-ray box set. So good for you, Chris. Luke Thorne, my favourite David Lynch movie is Elephant Man, the best black and white movie from 1980s, along with absolutely terrific makeup, is Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein, 80s?
83?
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Sorry, apologies. Frankenstein. I would fight him on that as black and white movie from the 80s.
Putting on the Ritz.
Young Frankenstein's black and white, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've had a moment of self-doubt. Yeah. I think, given the time that when we sat out to do this, I think that is our comments. We sadly got more love for our vampire chat as we did, as opposed to talking about Lynch.
Well, that's their problem.
Yeah.
And also,
fuck yous.
Twitter, X, whatever the fuck you want to call it, over the last week since recording this, my whole Twitter has just been people saying nice things about Lynch. It's been nice on Twitter for once to have people just saying nice things, reposting nice things. People, you know, some people don't have money, but there's been a lot of people being like, here's a Google Drive with everything Lynch has ever made, including his music videos and everything else.
Yeah, it's finding like old interviews. Like I think I've seen someone today, someone like, I'm setting up this website as a Lynch archive.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Like, that's the response. Like, we want to keep his memory alive as long as possible.
In the same way, very different kind of thing. Here in Northern Ireland, we had the archive for Jerry Anderson.
Yes.
Presenter I fucking adore. Genius. and there's the archive, and they still look for people. Do you have any audio recordings, any interviews? Send it to us. So that's a fab thing, and I think that's an upbeat note, I think, to bring this pod to a close. We will be back. We've been a bit silly. I think we'll be back to our full silly banter boys in the next few pods. But yeah, we just wanted to kind of, I think you, Adam, messaged shortly after Lynch had passed, when the news had come through the group, and you just text going, Lynch pod?
Oh, it had to be done.
It had to be. I think even if, like, we had threatened a Lynch pod before, even if he hadn't died, I think at some point this year we probably would have went through either some of his filmography or like we did now, all of his filmography, because he is, to us and filmmakers around the world, he is just that loved that it's worth talking about.
And now we're free to do our Terry Crews retrospective.
Can't wait. I can't wait to watch Idiocracy.
Expendables 2 is going to be great. But no, one of the things, I have a thing from his book Room to Dream.
Mm-hmm.
It's the last paragraph. I was rereading passage of it, so will I read out loud?
Go for it.
All right. If I look at any page of this book, I think, man, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more, so many more stories. You could do an entire book in a single day and still not capture everything. It's impossible to really tell the story of somebody's life, and the most we can hope to convey in a very abstract rosebud. Ultimately, each life is a mystery until we each solve the mystery, and that's where we all are headed, whether we know it or not. May everyone be happy. May everyone be free of disease. May auspiciousness be seen everywhere. May suffering belong to no one. Peace. I always thought that was just a lovely end of a book, and a nice wee place to stop.
And that's a nice way to bring this pod to a close. So all that's left for me to do now is thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks, Jim.
And given the podcast, I'm not going to bother selling my wares. You know where to find us. If you've enjoyed this pod, leave us a review. It helps us with the algorithm.
And Jim, there's someone else to thank. Thank you, David Lynch.
Thank you, David Lynch.
Thanks, Dave.
Without you, as Joe said, we might not have had BanterFlix.